The words cut through the courtroom like a blade. Your Honor, this man is worth nothing to this family anymore. My daughter-in-law Jessica stood at the plaintiff's table, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy as she gestured toward me like I was evidence in a fraud case. Behind her, my son Marcus stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I stayed perfectly still in my seat, because what they didn't know was that I had spent the last 6 weeks building a case so airtight that no amount of perjury could crack it, and the statement in the judge's hands would prove everything. You're probably wondering how a 70-year-old retired architect ended up in family court, watching his own son try to have him declare incompetent so they could seize control of his assets. And why I'm sitting here completely calm while my child's lawyer paints me as a senile burden. Let me take you back 7 weeks. Because what Marcus forgot is that I didn't spend 40 years designing buildings that could withstand hurricanes just to crumble under family betrayal. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 70 years old, a retired architect who spent 4 decades designing structures that still define Miami's skyline. Hospitals, cultural centers, residential towers engineered to weather Category 5 storms. I built my reputation on precision, on creating foundations that could bear impossible weight. But nothing in my training prepared me for the moment I discovered my own son was constructing a legal framework to erase my autonomy and steal everything I'd built. 7 weeks ago, on a Wednesday afternoon around 2:30 p.m., I found a folder hidden behind the couch in my guest room. The room where Marcus and Jessica had been staying temporarily for the past 4 months. Inside were medical consultation forms with my forged signature, requesting cognitive assessments I'd never authorized. Notes in Jessica's handwriting, establish pattern of confusion, document incidents, real or perceived, and at the bottom, circled in red, conservatorship filing, 8-12 weeks. My hands went cold as I held those papers under the afternoon light streaming through the window I'd personally designed to catch the sun at exactly that angle. This wasn't speculation. They had a timeline, a strategy, a calculated plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. The forms were dated 3 months back, which meant they'd been plotting this since before they even asked to move in. But what I discovered 4 days later made that seem like just the foundation of something much darker. I started watching more carefully. On Sunday morning, I heard voices coming from my home office, the room where I'd kept 40 years of project files and personal documents. Jessica's voice was sharp and certain. Once the doctor confirms cognitive decline, we can move forward with the conservatorship petition. My brother's a psychiatrist. He'll testify that Thomas needs full-time supervision. Marcus's response was quieter, uncertain. But Dad seems completely fine. He manages everything. Jessica's laugh was ice. Perception is everything in these cases. We document enough concerning behaviors, and the court will side with family trying to protect an aging parent. It's textbook. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about greed. It was a systematic legal attack designed to strip me of my rights, my property, and my independence. They were building a false narrative, brick by brick. But the evidence I uncovered 3 days later would reveal they'd already filed the first legal documents, and the hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out.
Even the 1967 Mustang in the garage I'd restored with my own hands. Liquidation timeline and estimated net after fees. I sat at that desk for a long time, staring at my son's name on those emails. The same son I'd talked to draft blueprints, who'd help me survey sites during summer breaks. Now he was surveying my entire life like a property marked for demolition. That evening, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them, I wouldn't argue or plead. I would do what I'd done my entire career, build a defense so structurally sound that no amount of false testimony could bring it down. I contacted my neighbor Helen Rodriguez, a retired family court judge who'd lived 3 houses down for 12 years. When I showed her the documents, her expression turned grim. "Thomas," she said, her voice steady but serious, "this is elder abuse with intent to commit financial exploitation. You need to document everything, retain an attorney who specializes in elder rights, and prepare for a legal battle. These cases can be won, but only with overwhelming evidence." That night, I began constructing the case that would demolish their plan. Over the next 6 weeks, I became a man on a mission. I underwent comprehensive cognitive assessments with 3 independent physicians, all confirmed perfect mental acuity. I installed security cameras throughout my home, capturing footage of my daily independence. I gathered 40 years of financial records, proving meticulous money management. I obtained statements from colleagues, neighbors, and my primary physician. I hired Patricia Nguyen, the most respected elder law attorney in South Florida. And I documented every single lie they'd told, every forged signature, every fabricated incident. Because I knew the court date was coming, and when that judge opened my statement, the truth would be undeniable. But to understand why this betrayal felt like watching the foundation of my life crack apart, you need to know one thing. I built my career on trust. It was 1985 when I designed my first major project, a community hospital in Coral Gables. The lead engineer told me the foundation I'd proposed was overbuilt, too expensive, unnecessary. I held my ground. "When people's lives depend on a structure," I told him, "you don't cut corners. You build something that can withstand forces you haven't even imagined yet." That hospital survived Hurricane Andrew in 1992 while buildings around it crumbled. After my wife Elena died 6 years ago from a stroke, architecture became my anchor. I kept working on pro bono projects for nonprofits, mentoring young architects, maintaining the home Elena and I had designed together in 1988. Marcus had moved to California years before, visiting maybe once a year, always brief. Until 4 months ago, when he called saying he and Jessica were going through a difficult time financially and asked if they could stay with me just temporarily. I said yes, because I remembered the boy who used to trace my blueprints, who told me he wanted to build things that mattered. I thought I was giving my son shelter during a crisis. I didn't realize I was giving predators access to their target. Now, sitting in this courtroom, watching my son's attorney argue that I was too mentally compromised to manage my own affairs, I understood something with absolute clarity. The truth, like a well-designed structure, could withstand any amount of pressure, and I had engineered it to be indestructible. The morning after I showed Helen the documents, she came to my house with a legal pad and 20 years of courtroom experience. "Thomas, I've seen cases like this destroy people," she said, her voice carrying the weight of too many lost battles. Adult children filing for conservatorship, claiming their parent is incompetent, when really they just want control of assets. Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late, until they've lost the right to make their own decisions, access their own money, even choose where they live. She looked at me directly. "But you have something most don't. Time to prepare, and evidence of their plan before they execute it.
We used that advantage to build an unbreakable defense. 2 days later, I sat in Patricia Neugen's office, a space lined with legal texts and framed letters from grateful clients. She reviewed every document I'd brought with the precision of a structural engineer analyzing load calculations.
Miss Brennan, what they're attempting is called predatory conservatorship, she explained, her voice calm but firm. They're creating a paper trail of fabricated incompetence to convince a judge you can't manage your affairs. But we're going to counter with something they didn't anticipate: comprehensive documentation of your complete mental and functional capacity. Over the next week, Patricia helped me establish multiple layers of protection. Updated estate documents with explicit fraud protections, a living trust that couldn't be contested, healthcare directives naming independent medical professionals, and a detailed financial audit proving decades of sound money management. We created a legal firewall they'd never penetrate. 10 days before the hearing, Patricia's paralegal uncovered something that made my blood run cold. Marcus and Jessica had already submitted preliminary medical testimony to the court from Jessica's brother, Dr. Ryan Webb, a psychiatrist who'd written a 4-page assessment declaring I exhibited clear signs of progressive dementia, impaired judgment, and inability to manage complex financial decisions. The assessment was dated 6 weeks prior. Dr. Webb had never met me, never examined me, never spoken to me or any physician who'd actually treated me. Yet he'd written with absolute certainty that I was mentally incompetent, citing specific incidents that had never occurred. Forgetting to pay utilities, my bills were on autopay for 15 years. Getting lost driving to familiar locations, I'd driven the same routes for decades without incident. And exhibiting paranoid delusions about family members. The ultimate irony, my awareness of their scheme was being framed as mental illness. Patricia's expression was steel. "This is perjury, Mr. Brennan. Dr. Webb filed a sworn statement about a patient he's never evaluated. But here's the critical thing. This establishes their willingness to commit fraud, and that becomes evidence of malicious intent." I spent the next 3 weeks documenting my independence with the same precision I'd once used for architectural drawings. Every morning, I logged activities, prepared meals, managed correspondence, drove to appointments, handled investments, maintained the house. Helen helped me install security cameras in common areas, legal since it was my property. And the footage told an undeniable story. I was completely self-sufficient. I managed complex financial transactions. I maintained the home impeccably. And Marcus and Jessica? The cameras showed them sleeping until noon, contributing nothing to household expenses, and spending hours on their laptops, presumably coordinating their legal attack. "Every frame of this footage," Patricia said, reviewing it with satisfaction, "dismantles their narrative." 3 weeks before the hearing, Jessica left her laptop open on the kitchen table, a mistake born of overconfidence. A folder labeled TB Conservatorship contained everything. Hundreds of pages, screenshots of my banking logins, my passwords, somehow obtained. Detailed inventories of every asset I owned with estimated values. Email exchanges with a real estate investor discussing property available within 90-120 days, motivated sellers, estate situation. Messages with Dr. Webb coordinating his false testimony. And an Excel spreadsheet titled Timeline to Control with phases. File petition, complete. Submit medical testimony, complete. Hearing, 4 weeks. Conservatorship granted, anticipated. Transfer assets, 30 days after. Liquidate non-essential property, 60 days. Non-essential property. My home.
The Mustang Elena and I drove to our wedding. The architecture library I'd spent 40 years collecting. One email from Jessica to Marcus stood out, written just 2 days after they'd moved in. Your dad's sharper than we thought, but it doesn't matter. Once Ryan files his assessment, the court will side with family. TB won't even understand what's happening until it's done. By the time he contests anything, we'll have control of liquid assets. My hands shook holding that laptop. They hadn't just planned to steal from me. They'd planned to do it while making me look crazy for resisting. That's when I forwarded everything to Patricia and made one more call to Adult Protective Services. The night before the hearing, I sat in my study looking at photos from Marcus's childhood. Birthday parties in the backyard I'd landscaped, his high school graduation, the day he got accepted to college, his smile wide and genuine. I thought about Elena's last words to me, holding my hand in that hospital room. Building something strong means knowing which materials are solid and which will crumble under pressure. Don't compromise your foundation. She would have told me to protect myself. At 6 a.m., I put on my Navy suit, the one I'd worn to project presentations, gathered my documentation, and drove to the courthouse. Patricia met me at the entrance, briefcase in hand. "Ready to show them what truth looks like?" she asked. "I've been ready my entire career." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and fluorescent lit, with that particular smell of old paper and floor polish. Marcus and Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Robert Klein who specialized in conservatorship cases. I sat across the aisle with Patricia, my documentation organized in labeled binders. 40 years of architectural training had taught me the power of visual presentation. Judge Sandra Morrison entered at precisely 9 a.m. Klein opened with practiced sympathy, painting me as a tragic figure, a once brilliant architect now suffering from progressive cognitive decline that made me a danger to myself and vulnerable to exploitation. He submitted Dr. Webb's fraudulent assessment, affidavits from Marcus and Jessica describing fabricated incidents of confusion, and financial records they claimed showed erratic money management. Jessica took the stand, her voice quivering with fake concern. "Your Honor, we love Thomas, but he's not the man he used to be. He forgets conversations within minutes. He's made alarming financial decisions. We're terrified he'll lose everything he worked for." Marcus testified next, barely able to look at me. "My dad needs help he won't accept. We're only trying to protect him." Klein concluded, "The evidence clearly demonstrates Mr. Brennan lacks capacity to manage his affairs. We're requesting full conservatorship with my clients as co-conservators." The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison turned to Patricia. Patricia stood, calm and precise. "Your Honor, what you've just heard isn't evidence of incompetence, it's evidence of fraud, and we can prove it." She handed the judge our first exhibit, comprehensive cognitive assessments from 3 independent physicians, all conducted within the past month, all confirming perfect mental acuity. Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. Michael Torres, and Dr. James Whitfield, none have any connection to my client, all concluded Mr. Brennan demonstrates cognitive function in the 95th percentile for his age. Next, 40 years of financial records showing meticulous money management. Not one missed payment, not one bounced check, not one questionable transaction. Then, the security footage. Patricia played clips on the courtroom screen. Me cooking, managing correspondence, maintaining the house, driving. Completely independent. Your Honor, Dr. Ryan Webb claimed to have evaluated my client and diagnosed dementia. But Dr. Webb has never met Mr. Brennan. This assessment, she held up the document, is perjury. Finally, she submitted the emails from Jessica's laptop. Every word of their plan laid out in their own writing. Jessica's face drained of color. Marcus stared at the table. They didn't move in to help, Your Honor. They moved in to position themselves for a legal theft, and they fabricated evidence to do it. Judge Morrison's expression shifted from judicial neutrality to something harder. Mr. Klein, I'd like your clients to respond to these allegations. Klein tried to redirect, to minimize, but Judge Morrison cut him off. Ms. Webb, you testified that you love your father-in-law and only want to help him. Yet I'm looking at emails where you call him TB, discuss liquidating his property, and coordinate false medical testimony. Would you like to explain? Jessica's voice turned sharp, the mask dropping. Your Honor, this man is worth nothing to this family anymore. He's a burden, an obstacle. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. That's enough. She turned to me. Mr. Brennan, I believe you submitted a written statement for the record. Yes, Your Honor. She opened it and began to read aloud. My name is Thomas Brennan. For 40 years, I built structures designed to protect people. Hospitals where children were born, schools where futures were shaped, homes where families built memories. I built them to last, to withstand forces that would tear apart anything weak or poorly constructed. I never imagined I'd need to build a defense against my own son. The evidence before this court shows a calculated plan to strip me of my rights, my property, and my autonomy. Not because I'm incompetent, but because I'm inconvenient. Because my assets are valuable and my resistance is an obstacle. I'm 70 years old. My mind is clear. My hands are steady. I manage every aspect of my life with the same precision I brought to every building I designed. And I will not be erased by lies. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Morrison looked up from the page, her gaze moving from me to Marcus and Jessica. Motion for conservatorship denied. Permanently. Marcus and Jessica left the courtroom like structures evacuated before demolition, hollow, silent, diminished. Klein spoke to them in the hallway in urgent, quiet tones. Jessica walked away first, phone already out, calling someone. Marcus stood there for a long moment, looking back at me through the courtroom doors. For just a second, I saw the boy who used to help me measure board lengths, who'd asked 1,000 questions about how buildings stood up. Then he turned and walked away. 6 weeks later, an envelope arrived with Oregon postage. Marcus's handwriting, less confident than it used to be. Dad, I know I don't deserve a response. I know what I did is unforgivable. Jessica convinced me you were losing capacity, that we were just accelerating inevitable, that we deserved compensation for caregiving. I believed her because it was easier than admitting I was stealing from my own father. I'm in Portman now, separated from Jessica. Got a job with a small architecture firm, entry level, starting over. I think about what you taught me about foundations, about building things that last. I destroyed ours. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see what I did, and I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do it again. I read that letter 3 times. Then I wrote back 2 sentences. I forgive you, but I cannot forget. When you're ready to rebuild with honesty, my door is open for conversation, but my assets remain mine alone. 10 months later, I'm sitting on my back patio in the home I designed with Elena, morning sun warming the stone tiles I personally selected in 1988. A postcard from Marcus sits on the table beside my coffee. Portland skyline. A note on the back. Working on a community center project. Using your approach. Precision, integrity.
Building to last. Hope you're well. I send them postcards back now. Brief updates. No invitations, not yet. Some repairs take time. Helen comes by twice a week for coffee. Patricia became a friend. My home is quiet but not lonely. And I understand something now that 40 years of architecture never quite taught me. True strength isn't found in the structures we design. It lives in knowing when to hold on, when to let go, and having the wisdom to tell the difference.